It was a peaceful evening, with the sun beginning to set behind the hills and casting a warm orange glow over our quiet neighborhood. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and the soft hum of the radio played in the background. My son, Eric, had just come home from college for the weekend. There was a calm, comforting energy in the house, a feeling that comes with being familiar. Eric had grown up so quickly. It felt like just yesterday he was a little boy following me around the house and asking endless questions about life. Now, at 21, he was a young man, strong and confident, yet sometimes unknowingly distant. Our relationship had changed as he matured, and I was still getting used to it. When dinner was ready, I called him from the living room. As we settled down at the table, I noticed he looked at me differently, with an intensity that made me pause. At first, I thought I was imagining it. We talked about his classes, friends, and how much he missed home. But the way he spoke and the way his eyes lingered on mine made me feel something I couldn't quite explain. After dinner, we decided to watch a movie together, something we used to do all the time before he went to college. The living room felt cozier than usual, with the dim lighting and soft cushions creating the perfect setting for a quiet night in. It was a peaceful evening, with the sun beginning to set behind the hills and casting a warm orange glow over our quiet neighborhood. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and the soft hum of the radio played in the background. My son, Eric, had just come home from college for the weekend. There was a calm, comforting energy in the house, a feeling that comes with being familiar. Eric had grown up so quickly. It felt like just yesterday he was a little boy following me around the house and asking endless questions about life. Now, at 21, he was a young man, strong and confident, yet sometimes unknowingly distant. Our relationship had changed as he matured, and I was still getting used to it. When dinner was ready, I called him from the living room. As we settled down at the table, I noticed he looked at me differently, with an intensity that made me pause. At first, I thought I was imagining it. We talked about his classes, friends, and how much he missed home. But the way he spoke and the way his eyes lingered on mine made me feel something I couldn't quite explain. After dinner, we decided to watch a movie together, something we used to do all the time before he went to college. The living room felt cozier than usual, with the dim lighting and soft cushions creating the perfect setting for a quiet night in. I smiled, trying to lighten the mood. Well, you won't have to worry about that anytime soon, I joked. I'm not going anywhere. But Eric didn't laugh. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes locking onto mine. No, I mean it, he said. You've always been more than just my mom, you've been everything. I frowned. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning that I wasn't ready to face. I searched his face for any sign that he was just being sentimental, that this was just an innocent moment of affection. But there was something in his eyes that made my heart race, just like the night before. Eric, I whispered, you know how much I love you, right? Of course, he replied, stepping even closer. I love you too, more than you realize. My pulse quickened. This wasn't how a mother and son were supposed to talk, to look at each other. My mind screamed at me to step back, to put some distance between us, but my body felt frozen in place. I think we should head back, I said shakily. It's getting late. Before I could turn away, he gently took my hand. The touch seemed innocent enough, but the way he held on, the way his thumb slowly brushed against my skin, made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't ignore. Ma'am, he said softly, his voice filled with something I couldn't quite understand. I don't know how to say this, but I've been feeling something I shouldn't, and I think you felt it too. Panic surged through me. I pulled my hand away, taking a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. Eric, stop, I said, my voice trembling. You don't mean that. You're confused. He looked at me, his face a mix of confusion and hurt. I'm not confused, ma'am. I know how I feel. No, I said, shaking my head. This isn't right. You're my son. We can't. I couldn't even finish the sentence. The words felt too heavy to say out loud. Eric took a deep breath, his face clouded with emotion. I know it's not right, but I can't help how I feel. And I don't think you can either. Tears welled up in my eyes. As I struggled to keep my composure, I couldn't believe what was happening. This wasn't Ralphie's couldn't be happening. I had to stop it before things went too far, before we crossed a line that couldn't be undone. "I'm your mother," I said, my voice breaking. "I love you, but not like that. We can't, I can't." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I saw the pain in his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped in defeat. He nodded slowly, looking down at the ground, ashamed. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to. I didn't want to make you uncomfortable." I swallowed hard, trying to push down the overwhelming mix of emotions swirling inside me. "It's okay," I said softly, though I wasn't sure if it really was. "Let's just go home." The drive home was painfully silent. Neither of us said a word. The weight of what had been said on the trail hung between us, making every second feel unbearable. I focused on the road, my mind racing as I tried to process what had just happened. I couldn't believe the words that had come out of his mouth, feelings he had confessed. It felt like everything I thought I knew about our relationship had been turned upside down. When we finally pulled into the driveway, Eric muttered something about going to his room. I didn't stop him as he disappeared upstairs. I collapsed onto the couch, my body trembling from holding back my emotions. I didn't know how to make sense of any of it. He was my son, my baby boy, but he wasn't a boy anymore, and it was becoming terrifyingly clear that our relationship had taken on a complexity neither of us had expected. I wanted to believe that his feelings were just a phase, something fleeting that would pass with time. But the way he had looked at me, the way his hand had lingered on mine, told me otherwise. A part of me felt guilty, like maybe I had done something wrong. Maybe I had been too affectionate, too close, over the years. But that couldn't be right, could it? Mothers were supposed to love their sons, to nurture them, to always be there for them. That's all I had ever done. But now, everything felt tainted by this strange tension between us, and I didn't know how to fix it. I spent the rest of the day trying to avoid Eric, throwing myself into chores and anything else that could distract me from the confusion swirling in my mind. By evening, I was emotionally drained. I didn't want to confront what had happened, but I knew I couldn't keep running from it. Eric and I couldn't continue, like this, pretending everything was normal when it was anything but. That night, after hours of tossing and turning in bed, I heard a knock on my door. My heart sank. I knew it was him. "Ma'am, can I come in?" Eric's voice was soft, almost hesitant. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to say no, to create the distance we both desperately needed, but I couldn't keep avoiding him. I had to face this, no matter how uncomfortable it made me. "Come in," I said quietly, sitting up in bed and pulling the covers around me as if they could somehow shield me from the emotional storm I knew was coming. Eric stepped inside, his face as conflicted and unsure as I felt. He stood by the door for a moment, clearly struggling with what to say or do. Finally, he moved to the edge of the bed but kept his distance. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I shouldn't have said what I said earlier. I don't know what came over me." I nodded, trying to find the right words. "I know this is confusing," I began gently. "But what happened earlier, it can't happen again. Eric, we have to be careful. This isn't how things are supposed to be." "I know," he whispered, his eyes downcast, "but it's so hard. Ma'am, I don't know why I feel like this. I've tried to push it away, but it just keeps coming back." His words hit me hard, stirring a deep sadness. I felt for him, for us both. This was a situation I never could have imagined, and yet here we were, tangled in a mess of emotions neither of us knew how to unravel. "I'm your mother," I said again, my voice steady but tender. "That's all I can never be. You know that, right?" He looked up at me, pain etched across his face, but he nodded. "I know," he said quietly. I don't want to lose you." "You're not going to lose me," I assured him. "But we need boundaries, Eric. This is dangerous territory." Silence fell between us. The tension from earlier still hung in the air, heavy and unresolved, but we had taken a step home that, I hoped, would guide us back toward safer ground. The story concludes with a somber reflection. on the irreversible changes that have unfolded between the mother and son. Despite their best efforts to create distance and regain a sense of normalcy, the emotional complexity lingers, casting a shadow over their once simple relationship. The mother wrestles with a mix of guilt, sadness, and confusion, knowing that their bond has shifted in ways neither of them could have foreseen. Although they've taken steps toward resolving the tension, there is an unspoken understanding that things can never truly return to how they were. As the son leaves for school, the house feels emptier than ever, and the mother finds herself haunted by thoughts of him. Unable to shake the weight of what has transpired, time and space might bring clarity, but there is a palpable uncertainty about what the future holds for their relationship. The closing invitation to the audience asking them to subscribe for more videos seems to contrast with the emotional weight of the narrative, perhaps signaling that the story is part of a series of similarly intense personal confessions or fictional tales.